So you heard the governor there. He said it looks like it might be good for Amy Klobuchar, maybe not so much for Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden. So that was pretty prescient. Did you expect it?
I did. I mean, you could get the sense when you're up in New Hampshire last week that there's something was moving for Amy Klobuchar. I mean, any conversation I had with people, and you'd sort of mention her name, people would invariably say, "Oh, I like her." You know, I like her a lot. And Elizabeth Warren, I mean, I think, frankly, it's kind of devastating for Elizabeth Warren. You know, a year ago, you know, if you didn't get the sense that she needed to win in New Hampshire, neighboring state, the last person from Massachusetts not to win was my old boss, Ted Kennedy, in 1980. You know, people in New Hampshire have been very kind to people from Massachusetts, and I think I'm not sure how she recovers from this. At a time when Amy Klobuchar is sort of capturing that moderate wing of the party and moving forward.
Yeah, but deconstruct a little bit the Biden phenomena here, right? Yeah. I mean, he declared early in his campaign he was competing heavy in Iowa, heavy in New Hampshire. He was up in the polls. He spent, you know, a month and a half in Iowa on the No Malarkey tour. He put TV money up in New Hampshire, but not enough to even make an impact. I mean, I think he spent a little over $300,000 here, and kind of phoned in the debate and then left early. I mean, is that any way for someone who's saying, hey, my entire premise for being in this race is my electability?
I mean, you kind of have sympathy for you know, this tremendous amount of goodwill for the former vice president. Very, very well liked in the Democratic Party, but you have to give a reason why you're running, I think. And you know, based on your resume and what you've done, I think isn't quite enough. When you've got you know, Bernie Sanders, who the interesting thing about Bernie Sanders is he hasn't really changed for the times. He's exactly the same person he was 40 years ago. But then you've got Amy Klobuchar, who really just hit her stride and was really making a connection with people. The "I know you" or that phrase really made a connection in a way that Biden was not able to. And I think he collapsed, and I think she was the benefit from it.
So, and you just mentioned Bernie Sanders, and you know, I think one of the things that surprised me was that 75% of voters turned out and voted against, or they voted not against him necessarily, but for somebody else. And 60% of people chose in that moderate lane: Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden. So, what do you say to Democrats who are sort of struggling with this, you know, electability issue, and who feel that there is this tension in the party between these progressives and these moderates, and the moderates seem to have the numbers on their side, at least in New Hampshire? Yeah,
although I think if you say that, it makes the Bernie supporters' heads explode.
Yeah, very angry.
You do.
I don't want to anger them.
Yeah, you do. And even at the party dinner on Saturday night, when Pete Buttigieg spoke, the Bernie Sanders people were booing him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, we have to, I think, recognize as Democrats that this is where our electorate is. Half this vote yesterday was independents. They tend to be more moderate. They're going to be voting and deciding the election in November. And I think we have to, you know, even if it ends up being Bernie Sanders in a multi-candidate field, we have to appeal, our message has to appeal to more moderate voters.
Is the bigger problem for the Democratic Party potentially Bernie Sanders as the candidate or Bernie Sanders as not the candidate? And by that, what I mean is the booing example is a good example. They may just stay home. It's not clear that they'll rally around another candidate from the Democratic Party.
I think you've hit exactly on it. I mean, frankly, I think it's, you know, it's a lose-lose proposition for the Democrats with Bernie Sanders. If he gets the nomination, he alienates the 75% or a portion of it, and if he doesn't, you know, already he's won the first two contests, and already they're crying foul almost, you know, and he's won two, so they're sort of girding up for that kind of a fight.
Well, you know, party discipline's everything. I mean, Republicans nominated Donald Trump in a multi-candidate field that pressed out the primary way into May and allowed Trump to vector off of other candidates like Kasich and Cruz to be able to win primaries well below 50% and become the nominee. That's got to be the concern everybody has about Bernie. So do you think there's enough juice in the party leadership, or I would say sensitivity in the candidates themselves, to realize that splitting up that vote that you described as being, you know, widely distributed on the moderate side is bad for the party and ultimately bad for the presidential campaign?
Right. I mean, first, I think there's no juice in the Democratic Party leadership. I don't even know who that might be. It's I don't think it's Tom Perez. But I think, you know, in the same way that I think Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders in 2016 were two sides of the same coin,
right, in
a lot of respects. And I think now maybe the election is different. Trump is in there. Do we, you know, maybe the time is sort of past Bernie Sanders by nationally for this, not in the primaries, not in the way that these things skew activist and progressive, but more in the general election. So it could be that his time was 4 years ago.